The American parasite. No one thought it could happen in North America. A parasite that uses your body as its personal feeding ground, taking over first your stomach, then your entire GI tract, forcing you to crave the foods it wants, while slowly destroying your body from the inside out. Governments are finally admitting that this is real. Measures have been proposed in New York and the country of Mexico to try and stop it. But by the time you watch this, it may already be too late. My name is Craig Capetta. I'm the Director of Science and Nutrition at Whole Body Research International, and have spent the last 24 months working with my team of doctors and scientists to figure out a way to stop this parasite that is already estimated to be infecting 250 million Americans. Perhaps the scariest thing is that its symptoms come on slowly. You may never even realize your fatigue, weight gain, or lack of sleep is the result of this bad bug, until it finally takes over and forces you to seek medical attention. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a simple test you can do to find out whether or not you've been infected, and if so, how to get rid of it before it causes potentially irreversible damage. I'm also going to expose the major government screw-up that allowed this to happen, and how they are now scrambling to fix it. Warning, the information I'm about to share with you is controversial because this parasite comes from the most unlikely place, your food supply. In the next few minutes, I'm going to expose the manipulative practices of several very large corporations, companies like General Mills, Nestle, and Coca-Cola, that they prayed the public would never discover. It's a tangled web of bribery that makes your average politician look like a saint. And they are currently spending tens of millions of dollars in false advertising to try to cover up what they have done. But it's about time someone pulled back the curtain. That's why I've spent a considerable amount of time and my own money over the last few months creating this video that they do not want you to see. So if you're serious about the health of your family, turn off your cell phone, take a seat, and make sure you watch every word of this presentation. What you are about to see and hear may shock you, but it may also save your life. Let's get started. The year was 1950. The death rate by heart disease in America had jumped to an astonishing 30%. Only far back as the 1900s, it was 10%. In just 50 years, deadly heart attacks had increased by a factor of 3 times. People were dropping dead at an alarming rate, and no one could figure out why. Then, on September 24, 1955, America's own president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, suffered a heart attack, sending the entire nation into a panic. The crisis was now real. On Monday, September 26th, the Dow Jones plunged 6.5%. The total paper loss of the day was $14 billion, the largest ever, including that of the Great Depression. President Eisenhower would not walk again until October 25th, and would not return to the White House until November 11th, nearly 6 weeks later. By this time, the fear of heart attacks was on everyone's mind. Enter government researcher Ancel Keys. Mr. Keys was a Harvard-educated scientist who had helped design rations for the U.S. Army during World War II. Mr. Keys set out to discover why Americans had the highest rate of heart attacks out of any of the first world countries. In what would later become known as the 7-country study, Mr. Keys discovered that Mediterranean nations had the lowest heart attack rates in the world. Their diet also contained the lowest amount of fat. He concluded the American high-fat diet was to blame for our heart attack problem. Correct or not, finally, the public had an answer. In 1956, representatives of the American Heart Association appeared on television to inform the public that a diet which included fats, such as butter and lard, and fatty foods, such as eggs and beef, would directly lead to deadly coronary heart disease. The government's own health officials began recommending people adopt a low-fat diet to protect themselves and their families. Brochures on how to eat low-fat were passed out in schools. No one wanted to suffer the same fate as the president, or worse, drop dead. Most were fine with Mr. Keys' reasoning. He became a celebrated hero and was even put on the cover of Time magazine, though he himself would many years later change his own opinion on the matter. For the time, a low-fat diet was universally accepted as the only surefire heart attack fix. Yet there was one sector that wasn't happy with this, and that was the big food conglomerates. You see, previous to Keys' findings, their favorite way to flavor their foods was by adding more fat. Food scientists had discovered that fat was a flavor carrier. It could deliver taste and odor compounds from different parts of food, and provided texture and mouthfeel that made food taste better. Without fat, food tasted like cardboard. But now, the public was demanding their foods be low-fat. Processed and canned foods began to go uneaten as people turned to more natural, lower-fat alternatives. If it didn't say low-fat on the label, people stopped buying it. The conglomerates scrambled to find new recipes that would allow them to call their products low-fat, yet still taste good. Food scientists were called in by the dozens, and finally they discovered something even better. You see, unlike fat, this new flavor additive was actually addicting. It goes by many different names, but you may know it best as refined sugar. Did the food industry know it was dangerous? Even many doctors of the 1950s would argue they certainly did. As far back as 1808, studies had been done proving sugar was not only unhealthy, but actually toxic. Believe it or not, sugar manufacturers were pulling PR stunts back then, as they do today. In 1808, the Committee of West India, a large sugar conglomerate of the time, appeared before the British House of Commons to offer a prize of 25 guineas, about $1,000 in today's coin, to anyone who could show an experiment that proved sugar was good for feeding and fattening cows, hogs, and sheep. Food for animals has always been expensive. Sugar was extremely cheap, so many farmers took on the challenge, hoping for good results. The 25 guineas would be just a bonus to the new, cheaper food supply. But as you may have guessed, the attempts were a disaster. Many resulted in the death of livestock. One member of Parliament, John Kirwan, took on the challenge himself, trying to feed sugar and molasses to his calves. After the experiment of this well-known, highly ranked politician failed, the Committee of West India gave up. Then, in 1816, the well-known French physiologist F. Magendie did an experiment of his own involving dogs. He determined that dogs fed with water containing sugar and olive oil wasted away and died faster than dogs fed with water alone. This showed sugar not only had no nutritional value, but actually caused negative effects. This shut the sugar manufacturers up, but just for the time being. Flashback to 1957. Fat was out. The food industry had found foods packaged with sugar were winning every taste test. But would the public buy it? As recently as the 1930s, Dr. Weston A. Price, a research dentist from Ohio, had traveled around the world observing different cultures and their diets. In 1939, he published a paper that revealed in horrifying detail what had happened to the teeth and health of those in cultures who had incorporated refined sugars into their food supply. Sugar still had a bad name. The conglomerates would need to make a move. Later, in 1957, noted Professor E.V. McCollum, who was often referred to as America's top nutritionist of the day, published a book called A History of Nutrition. In it, he argued that despite there being dozens of experiments done since the 1800s, proving sugar was bad for human consumption, those experiments were all flawed due to human error. This book was published and marketed with the same ferocity you see with bestsellers today. But where did it come from? No scientist has his own money to publish a book on such a grand scale. And let's face it, A History of Nutrition? It's not a title that will make a book fly off the shelves. A look inside the book revealed it was published and marketed by a company called the Nutrition Foundation, Incorporated. Who was the Nutrition Foundation? I'm glad you asked. It happened to be a front organization for the leading sugar conglomerates of the time, including the American Sugar Refining Company, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Curtis Candy Company, General Foods, General Mills, Nestle, Pet Milk Company, and Sunshine Biscuits, about 45 companies in all. And did the Americans buy it? Oh boy, did they ever. Sales of processed foods skyrocketed. All they had to do was put low fat on the label, then dump in a bunch of refined sugar, and it would sell like crazy. A 2012 study by Dr. Robert Lustig of the University of California, San Francisco, revealed that sugar is just as addictive to the human brain as cocaine, setting off the same dopamine triggers and forcing us to crave more and more of it. So it was only natural that humans would begin to consume the new sugared products at a feverish rate. The food conglomerates responded to the increasing sales by using even more sugar. It began to find its way into foods you would never expect, like hot dogs, yogurt, spaghetti, and breads. As the decades passed, obstacles would spring up, but each time, the conglomerates had an answer. In 1965, the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act began, requiring their products to be honestly and informatively labeled. By this time, the public wasn't so hot on sugar anymore, but that made no difference. The conglomerates simply hid the sugar by putting it into new forms and creating new names. This way, people wouldn't see the word sugar on the food label, but it could still be hiding inside. Some names sugar goes by are agave nectar, brown rice syrup, high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, evaporated cane juice, glucose, lactose, malt syrup, molasses, sucrose. Another classic example is when the sugar pushers began putting the word natural into all of their advertising. Made from natural ingredients became their slogan, but all refined sugars are made from natural ingredients. So is cocaine and heroin. During the 1970s, armed with new studies showing the dangers of refined sugars and exposing them in all of their forms, the American public began to wake up. For the first time since the 50s, sales of certain high-sugar foods slowed down. But the conglomerates had prepared for this and had been hard at work developing yet another weapon of their own: artificial sweeteners. Perhaps the most notorious of these was aspartame, more commonly known as Equal or NutraSweet. The story of how it became approved by the FDA is startling. By this time, the diet craze was in full swing, and the diet food market was a billion-dollar industry. It was banned in 1973, and another artificial sweetener, cyclamate, had recently been banned when it was found to cause tumors in tests done on animals. Aspartame was initially also rejected by the FDA, but its developer, G.D. Searle, was not having it. Searle presented the FDA 100 different studies that showed it was harmless, studies G.D. Searle had funded themselves. Why not? They knew if they could get it approved, they would make billions. But despite what their studies said, every time an independent study was done, it was found to be dangerous for human consumption. For the first time in history, the FDA sought criminal investigation into a food manufacturer for misrepresenting the safety tests of a product. What the investigation revealed was shocking. Deceased lab animals from the tests were not autopsied for months or even years after their deaths, so that rotting would render any tumor data inaccurate. Other animals were found to have tumors cut out and thrown away. Then the animals with the removed tumors were labeled as normal. Obvious tumors were labeled as normal swelling. The FDA easily ruled that aspartame would not receive final approval. But what would follow was a set of dirty political tricks that must have made Abraham Lincoln roll over in his grave. G.D. Searle first arranged to actually hire the U.S. attorney who was leading the investigation. Samuel Skinner first resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Office, stalling the investigation, then went to work for Searle. Later that year, Donald Rumsfeld was hired on as CEO of Searle. Yes, the same Donald Rumsfeld that was Secretary of Defense during the Bush administration. He appointed several political buddies to top management positions and proclaimed he would get aspartame approved within 1 year. At the time, Reagan had just been elected, and Rumsfeld was part of Ronald Reagan's transition team, who was in charge of choosing a new FDA commissioner. They appointed a man named Arthur Hall Hayes, Jr. One of Arthur Hayes' first acts as FDA commissioner was to appoint a 5-person panel to review the final decision to reject aspartame. 3 of the 5 panel members still voted not to approve it, citing the animal tumors as a big concern. So what did Hayes do? Simple. He appointed a 6th member to tie the vote at 3-3. Then Hayes, a man who knew nothing of food additives, decided he as a commissioner should get a vote also. He then cast the deciding vote himself, in favor of approval. Shortly after this scheme, Hayes resigned from his position as FDA commissioner, after which he was hired by Searle for a position paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I know this sounds like a tale from a political horror movie, but sadly, it is 100% true. After all was said and done, aspartame was approved. Coca-Cola began using it to make Diet Coke, which they then marketed as a weight loss drink. In that first year alone, the FDA received over 600 consumer complaints reporting headaches, dizziness, and other strange reactions to this new, foreign substance our bodies were never designed to handle. But the food conglomerates had won. And since then, over the last 30 years, more and more of these refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, preservatives, and other unnatural elements have infiltrated our food supply, creating essentially a new diet, without ever giving us a choice. The year now is 2013. Governments have finally wised up and are now backtracking, trying to clean up this mess.